Good afternoon. I'm Charles Solomon. I'm your moderator and host, as we're here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of an amazing piece of stop-motion animation, Tim Burton's Corpse Bride. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since we first saw these characters in this film. You know, I was 9 when I saw it, so it brings back a lot of memories. And we have 3 very special guests and a 4th surprise guest who will be here to talk about their experiences on the film. We have Ian Mackinnon of Mackinnon and Saunders, who takes the modest title of Puppet Maker. We have Anthony Scott, who was the supervisor of animation. And we have, from Barcelona, Carlos Grangel, who was the designer of the characters. So let's give them a warm welcome. To begin, gentlemen, when you started work on Corpse Bride, it wasn't a really particularly great time for stop-motion animation. Nightmare Before Christmas and The Wrong Trousers had been 1993, and there really hadn't been much at the really top level of that. CG was coming in and kind of taking over. Do you remember your thoughts about starting this project, an excitement about it, or a desire to kind of reestablish the medium? Anyone can jump in?
Yeah, I think most of our experience, is Corpse Bride for us took about 8 years before it actually came into fruition, so before we started work on it. I first saw the sketches that Tim had around 1995, and so we'd been talking about the project, for 8 to 10 years before it finally got underway. And I think that at that particular time, we'd worked with Tim on Mars Attacks, and the stop-motion animation had fallen through for various reasons. And so it was the emergence of some amazing computer animation. Toy Story and Jurassic Park and all these things that stop motion was being used less and less. Certainly very little in the VFX industry. So I think when the film finally happened, I think we all really believed, everyone that was working on it, that this might be the last stop motion movie to be ever made. And which is an amazing opportunity to think, well, if it is going to be the last one made, then let's put all our effort into it, because we might not get the opportunity again.
Carlos, was that also your feeling at the time?
My feeling at the time, and that was, I just had done one short film with Ian Mackinnon and Mackinnon and Saunders, The Periwick Maker. That is what you showed to Tim, and you got me the jobs, and I didn't pay you back. Do you want to tell that story that we went to see Tim in London?
I think the way the project developed, it'd been a project that Tim had wanted to do for a long time. The story had been introduced to him by Joe Ranft, I think around 92, 93, and he'd started doing sketches. And I think as we were talking about the project with Tim, every few years he said, we're going to make a stop motion, And around, I think, 96, Carlos and I had worked together on a short film called The Periwick Maker. And there was a quality to some of the sketches that Carlos had done that really stuck in my mind. So at the time when we started to think about the film was going to get green-lit, and we had various conversations with Tim at that point. And he was preparing to go to Alabama to film Big Fish. So we knew that he wasn't going to be able to give his full attention to the film. As much as he wants to be involved and was involved in every detail to it, but he was going to be doing that remotely. So at that particular point, it was the Carlos's sketches of The Periwick Maker, and I suddenly thought that it felt in the same realm as some of the sketches that Tim had done for Vincent. And this sort of very sallowed figure, sort of like the big eyes, and and I just thought, okay, well, if we're going to find someone to help work with Tim, Carlos seemed to have a really beautiful, style to his artwork. So yeah, we took Carlos with us, and we went to Tim's house, and they sort of
And Helena Bonham Carter reading a book. Do you remember that?
and they sort of welcomed and Adnay sort of yeah, it was great. Adnay sort of
He was
it
very nice.
amazing
From day
collaboration.
one. Yeah, he was open to share everything. So animation, he said, is not competing, is sharing. And he actually delegated. I think Tim could do it himself.
Yeah.
He's lazy. Sorry, don't say anything to anyone.
Anthony, you had worked at Pixar, but you said that you didn't feel the same spark doing CG that you get when you're working on a stop motion film. Can you talk about that and how you greeted the news of coming to work on this?
Yeah. So my background is stop motion since I was 11 years old, making little films with my toys and clay and cutout animation. My first job was on Gumby, clay animation. The first movie was Nightmare Before Christmas. So I love stop motion. At the same time, when Toy Story came out, I was very curious, what is the process? Because it looks great. So I was very curious. So after I worked on James and the Giant Peach, I was invited to work at Pixar. And they trained me on how to use a computer. I learned how to do that. I learned the whole process. And it just didn't feel the same to me. I could do it, but I really miss being on stage, collaborating with all the artists, working under the hot lights and smelling the hot glue, all that, the handmade quality of it. So I was at Pixar for about 2.5 years. I also worked at Phil Tippett's studio, So I tried it. I was in and out for about 4 years. But at that time, that was where most of the work was. And Leica wasn't around yet. However, I did get a call from the co-director, Mike Johnson, around 2002 to see if I was interested in supervising animation for Corpse Bride in London, and said yes right away. And about a year later, I moved to London and began that process.
Carlos, I remember you telling me that at other studios you would do multiple versions of characters when you were designing them, but you said that Tim had a rather different approach and greeted the sheafs of sketches in a way you didn't expect.
On this film, everything went so smooth you could not believe it. I was working on Madagascar, correct, when Tim came in, and so I was in sketches of Gloria and many presentations to JK, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and the directors, and nothing was approved. So this call comes from me and Mackinnon, and we go and visit Tim, and then we start working on, I have to say, I told Tim, listen, I have to talk to Jeffrey because I'm on Madagascar under contract at DreamWorks, and now we are gonna do this Warner Brothers project. And Tim said, Jeffrey's not gonna care because it's a stop motion. And I said, well, we'll see. He can sue me, if I break the contract. So I met with Jeffrey coming back to LA, and I said, Jeffrey, I have this story with Tim. And he said, what's this all about? And I said, I cannot talk about the plot, but it's a stop motion. He said, go and do your little shitty thing with Tim. Be sure that when you come back, you work on Kung Fu Panda 1 with Nicolas Marlet. So sign now, and you do your stop motion thing with him. So he didn't really care. So that was wonderful. But the process of approvals, and Ian knows, it was so smooth. He had notes on 3 characters, Barkus Bittern, that he wanted more belly, remember?
Yeah.
And if he had something to say, he will draw a doodle that was more beautiful than all my entire staff, and we will go from there. So it was fantastic. This film and Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, working with Lorna and Kelly Asbury, probably were the smoothest, because Prince of Egypt was hard, because it was such a heavy movie. But that movie was great.
But you also said that you would give Tim the usual portfolio of sketches, and he would just say, well, which one do you like?
Yeah, he did it 10 or 12 times. And then when they needed characters, because we had to fill the script because it was pretty empty of characters, we had to create Napoleon and Wellington and all these characters, 12, 13 characters, that they went straight to the movie, that they were not on the script. And that didn't happen to me before. And it still don't happen. It still hasn't happened.
I think Tim had lived with the lead characters for quite a number of years. I know, sort of 5 or 6 years he'd been drawing them. So he'd set out in his concept sort of artwork. I know the details that are still there. I know, like the corpse bride's always has a hole in her cheek. She's always has one bony leg and one fleshy leg, and I know the ribs are showing through the wedding dress. So I know sort of the foundations of the characters for the lead characters were there. I know sort of, and with Tim's artwork, he creates these very bold shapes, and I know sort of, and he's got a great eye, and he's very consistent. Then once he's got those details, then you know that they have to remain all the way through. But then I know, like Carlos said, the script had hundreds of characters, it had hundreds of skeletons, and all these amazing, sort of incidental characters that appear in the movie. So that's where they're expanding out the cast. And I think the thing is that Tim really loves the process of working with other artists. So when you've got someone that he trusts and someone that he admires their artistry, then then he wants their opinion, wants their sort of, well, which one would you choose? Which one? And that I think was a really lovely relationship between sort of Tim and Carlos, and then the sculptors. You could present the work to him, and I know everyone could have their voice. Everyone could put their opinion forward. Anthony and Mike could put their sort of comments through about what they wanted from the characters as well, and it was a very collaborative process. And
I suggested just one thing to Tim: let's push them more stylized, 20%, because I love Giacometti and Modigliani and all these artists that they were very stylized. So let's make them, if we can, a bit more elegant. And he went for it. I mean, he had no problem.
Yeah, but I think you told me you ended up designing, like, was it 82 characters and all?
Yeah, 82 puppets.
That's a lot of puppets. I'm curious to hear from all three of you how you work together. Could you go to Ian and Carlos, Anthony, and say, we're doing test animation, and can you change something in her hip, or can you make this leg stronger? Are there things that you needed for the animation that you could talk about the design and the making of the puppets, and how did that all happen?
Yeah, we were based in London, the studio where we shot the film, but Mackinnon and Saunders was up in Altrincham, up near Manchester. So I would fly up once a week, and just for a day, maybe two, and test all the different puppets, whatever was ready in whatever stage they were at, so I could give Ian feedback and Pete Saunders feedback on the facial mechanics, the costumes, make sure they could get into certain poses. Sometimes you have to build, special costumes or special puppets. Like if a character needs to sit down and the dress has to look a certain way, you might have to make a special puppet just for being sat for a long time. But I would do, whatever tests I could do. Eyelid tests, walk tests, test every aspect, give feedback, fly back to London, continue prepping down there, doing a lot of early corpse bride tests down in London as well. We're trying to figure out how to animate the dress. So there's a lot of back and forth, and that's how we did it back in those days. There was no FaceTime really, so I would just fly up there.
I'm curious, can you talk about that too? That, Carlos, would you take a design to Ian who would say, we have to attach this differently, or would you ask him, can you change a shape here that would accommodate the machinery inside the head? And how did you two, and particularly feeding off of the feedback you were getting from Anthony about how the puppet was moving when he was testing it?
We tortured these people. They got us exactly what we wanted, no matter what. You can describe me as the pushing guy, remember? tell them the story.
Push. It's a good, yeah, Carlos, I know, sort of, and I know, and his brother Jordi and Carlos Grangel, I know, their contribution to the film was amazing, and it was great working, working with a new team of people, and that gave us all of the tools so that I know the sculptors could keep, I know, sort of pushing the maquettes as far as possible. And sometimes you're like, no, that's going to be too thin. We won't be able to get an armature in it. But let's see, we can get a little bit thinner, and they survive. And it's a good thing. You just have to keep an open mind and think, well, how thin can we make it? And if it breaks later on, then that becomes Anthony's problem in a way.
Were you breaking their puppets?
I've broken puppets in the past, for sure.
Sorry, Anthony.
Yeah. But we're working on those sort of, when you look at Tim, the delicacy of the drawings that Tim and Carlos have done, and I think Carlos did like almost 300 pages of drawings.
550.
And they sort of like, and you look at the delicacy to those lines on there, and it's sort of, you're trying to find a way, well, how do we make metal and silicone, and how do we make foam latex and fabrics match with the elegance of those designs? So you have to keep like pushing yourselves, and a lot of the time you get resistance for, well, it's, that'll never work, but until you try it, until you actually, find out whether it breaks or not, then you have to just keep pushing those limits. And I think that's the great thing. Some animators are really delicate with the puppets. Some are really quite strong and quite, they'll push. But it's great if a puppet breaks on set. It's because they're trying to push to get the performance to move it on and to get something more physical out of it. So.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a quick puppet breaking story?
Yes, tell us of your smashing the puppets into temper.
It wasn't Corpse Bride, it was Nightmare Before Christmas, and Jack was in the cemetery on the Angel singing the Poor Jack song, and I animated that sequence, and I was moving his arm in, and his shoulder popped off. Like, his arm was still attached, but it was just kind of hanging there. And I'm in the middle of a 2-week shot. So I don't touch anything. I put all these gauges on him, call in the puppet department to unstitch the fabric, his costume, and then we had to swap out a couple of ball joints in the shoulder. They did that, stitched him back up. I got him back as close as I could. He was moving a little bit, so that that helps you if you ever break a puppet. Make sure your puppet's moving a little bit. And you cannot tell in the film. I just carried on, and when we played it back in dailies, you couldn't tell that he had.
Well, and that's a really amazing sequence that we had never seen anything like that in a stop-motion film before. That's I used to show that in class. To say this is a breakthrough, and that's something I was also hoping you would talk about. That both through the mechanics of the I guess in the heads of the puppets, the tiny gears and so forth, and the animation, this was a subtlety in stop motion to this film that audiences had never seen before, when Victor would kind of start to smile and his lip would move a little bit, or when Emily would do something with her eyebrows, or the very gentle movements of her head. There was a subtlety and a nuance to the performance that genuinely was new. No one had seen anything like it, because there had never been anything like it. And I wonder if the two of you could talk a little bit about that process and discovering what these puppets could do and the structure that underlaid the ability to do that.
I think it comes initially from the script, because I know sort of the whole premise of the film, the land of the living, they're very reserved, they're very corseted, they don't, I know sort of they're very subtle, gentle performances, very tight performances, and then you've got the land of the dead, and it's all very extreme. But I know that the key to that, I think, was we talked to Tim Burton and Mike Johnson, co-director. I know very early on, should we use the face replacement system that they'd use on Nightmare Before Christmas? And some of the things, it's a Victorian melodrama, and some of those subtle sort of romantic scenes and sort of the subtlety of the animation, it felt that it needed something that was a little bit quieter and a bit some more reserved. So Mike had seen a film that we'd worked on several years earlier, and we'd made one mechanical head puppet for that film called Fool the World and the Flying Ship. And Mike was adamant that we were going to go down this route of doing mechanical heads. And we were like, we made one puppet that time, and now we've got to make hundreds of puppets. And they sort of like, you know, and are they going to fit within the size? You know, the Corpse Bride's head's the size of a ping pong ball. So there was a lot of debate. We did some early 3D printed tests. We actually did some 3D printed tests using the Periwig Maker head. And they sort of just to see where that worked. But the 3D printing at that stage was really too, I know it looked like a melted face rather than anything of any elegance. So that started our quest to, okay, well, how do we create the mechanical heads? And I think what Mike wanted from that, and I think what Anthony and the animation team, what they enjoy about having the mechanical heads is that the animators create that entire performance on set. I know it's as close to capturing a live actor on a stage. You know, whatever you capture that day, every frame is down to that one animator. It's down to their performance, their acting. And by giving the mechanical head, rather than another animator predetermining all of the facial movement, that animator takes direction from the directors and the storyboard and the animatic and the voiceover, and they bring all those things together, and then they have to do the performance, and and hopefully the tools that we give them allow them to do every subtle movement with the with the characters, and allow them to to develop that performance on the set, and that's what's captured, and that's what you see on the screen at the end.
Well, Anthony, you were adjusting the expressions, as I recall. They were like little screwdrivers that you use?
Yeah, we put a little hex key into the ear to and turn it a certain way to make the puppets smile, and turn it the opposite way to make them frown, pull the corners of the mouth down. And then the jaw had a hinge, and you could do certain things with the lips. I actually personally like a challenge of a mechanical head as opposed to the replacement, which works great, and you can do a lot of subtle things too. But I actually like creating the performance with a mechanical head. We did have one character that was a replacement, the town crier. He had a series of, because his mouth was so big, he had to announce the news, and that was the appropriate choice for him.
Was there any puppet that you felt a particular sympathy with when you were animating, that you felt more inside or closer to?
You mean Scraps?
No, we'll come to Scraps later.
Okay, well, I love dogs, so. I mean, Emily, she's a very sympathetic character. I feel like I put more into her in the development and the testing phase, so yeah.
Speaking of Emily, we have a special guest here, which, Ian, if you want to bring her up.
Be careful. He's 20 years old.
She's flown in especially.
From Manchester, in UK.
Our own jubilicious corpse bride.
It's funny because her mechanical head can look beautiful or can look like a frog. Remember? If you turn the screw too much, remember?
Yeah, you have to,
The mouth can go outside too much.
So I know sort of, whilst we were working on the development of the Corpse Bride, I know the Emily character, I know sort of like Anthony said, he'd come up to Manchester every week, and I know sort of like we cram Anthony into a loft space where we had the animation testing unit, which is really quite low, and Anthony's quite tall, and we'd shove him in this loft, I know, for hours on end, and he'd be given the puppets to test, and it was great because the puppet makers, we had about 60 or 70 people on the crew, and he could talk to them directly then, give them sort of feedback. And there was one lunchtime, and Anthony finished his soup at lunchtime, and he had the soup spoon, and he was rather frustratingly like bending it like Uri Geller, and we're like thinking, oh God, he's lost the plot. We've finally broken him, and we didn't know what he was doing, but he took the soup spoon, cleaned it, and took it up to the loft where he was doing the animation test. And he put the soup spoon underneath Emily's dress, and then he just walked the puppet forward very gently. And as the dress and the silk of the dress sort of flows over the soup spoon, it looks like the wind is flowing through the dress. And that's how Anthony started to create the really magical sort of, you know, that softness, and that there's always a breeze blowing through the fabric. So we ended up creating these, clear plastic sort of versions of soup spoons to go underneath these rigs, which allowed for that lovely movement and that really graceful and sort of beautiful animation that the animators created.
Yeah, that's something Tim wanted early on. His big challenge was a very thin, almost transparent, translucent dress. You could see the light through it, but also wind blowing. So how do you get that without exposing rigs? And so we tried all these different tricks. And I'm sorry, I have to fix something on her.
Okay. Talking about that.
She's been, manipulated underneath the...
Yes, I've done panels like this with puppeteers before, and they cannot let the puppets alone. I remember sitting with Nick Park, and through the whole talk, he was adjusting Wallace and Gromit.
I love that, because Tim had something very special to say. He said, Carlos, you are doing her beautiful, but it's not sexy enough. And I said, Tim is a corpse. She's dead.
But she has to be a beautiful corpse. I know, so yeah.
And we push at the legs and show more leg and
I think
bigger
what
torso.
one of the things that I think whilst we're working on the maquettes and the blocking out the characters, what became very important is the height to the characters and pushing. I think probably if Carlos hadn't been there, we would have made them ever so slightly smaller. But I think we pushed the puppets, they are some of the tallest puppets that we've ever made at that stage. And I think that gives them an elegance. So, and I think, Tim really appreciates the fact that, the feet can be as small as possible, the hands can be small, have, that delicacy to them. And I think by actually increasing the size of them, and they can only go to a certain point because obviously we've got to build the sets, and 3mm Studios was bigger than it is now, but it was, it has a limited space. But I think that helps give the characters, that height gives them elegance, and but then once we've got the height for Corpse Bride and Victor, then Maudlin Everglot and everything else, they got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Pastor Gaswell
Yes.
is tallest.
I heard the scale was dictated by the size of the mouth, how small we can make the mouth.
That was
part of
the
it.
early conversations. Why you look at Victoria's mouth and how small it is on the drawings. It's a tiny little sort of beautiful lips, and you can't make them any bigger. So it was Victoria's lips that pretty much set the scale to the whole film, and everything had to be built around that. So we did various tests to see what size we could make her head, what size the lips would look like.
I tell my wife, because I inspire on Anna to do Victoria's, I will tell
Victoria's
her.
lips, they're
She will
Anna's
be so happy that her lips inspire the entire movie,
We thank Anna.
One of the most amazing sequences in the film, and a high point, is the remains of the day number, which is so complicated and so elaborate. Today, I think a lot of people just assume it would have to be CG to have that many figures moving so in such complicated ways. You have Mr. Bonejangles, who seems to be channeling Bob Fosse. You've got a whole chorus of dead people joining in the music. You've got skeleton musicians and a little homage to Disney's The Skeleton Dance when one plays the other. And I'm curious about thoughts all of you had or memories of that sequence, both creating the puppets, creating the designs, and then animating just such complex moves. Once again, it was something no one had ever seen anything like before.
It was clear that it was going to be a stop motion for every single character. So, and it was so challenging for all this crew that since Nightmare Before Christmas they didn't do, they did James and the Giant Peach, but the entire team wanted to do their very best, as always, in animation. And those guys are genius on what they do. So it was clear, and they will enjoy doing that. They didn't want it, actually, any CG, but we had to have some CG at some point and a couple of scenes on the veil.
Some of the veil shots,
Yeah.
just because
But that's it.
camera
It's-
moves,
it's
we couldn't have rigs.
1% CG, no AI at all.
And no, yeah,
No, their intelligence is all very general, very natural and very organic. There's nothing artificial about it. Now, I'm curious if you have memories. Did you work on that scene?
I did, yeah. Trey Thomas did a lot of the bone jangles. He's an excellent animator. We brought him over from the States. But I did animate several of the shots with the black background, with the skeletons playing the xylophone on each other, and using bones to create instruments. And they were playing the trombone, I think. Yeah, running around, chasing each other with guitar.
Sort of guitar made out of the pelvis.
Yeah, I did maybe 5 of those shots. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And yeah, it was definitely an homage.
And a huge, a big cast, and they sort of, and I think, Carlos and Tim were really keen not to have the cast look too generic, but obviously we had to use a lot of skeleton parts that we'd adapt them to try and create a bigger cast. But it's such a huge number, and I think it's great sort of, we love musicals, we love sort of like, those grand numbers. But I think what to me, why it works so well is that you have that big showstopper, the big musical number, but then it's contrasted with the delicacy of something like Victor meeting Victoria for the first time, and playing the piano, and that's an exquisite piece of animation of just two characters together in a very sort of simple, sort of large open background, but that you put those two together, and it's sort of suddenly it becomes really exciting, and that to see how far you can take the animation from the complete subtlety to the really over the top musical number. It's fantastic, for the animators, and fantastic for the puppet makers as well.
Now, and you also said, this is something all three of you talked about, that you shifted to digital cameras as the film was beginning, and that gave you the opportunity to do more with the cinematography because they were so much smaller than the 35 millimeters.
The film, I know it took many years to get underway, and then it had various sort of stop-starts along the way, and I think the film really sort of pivoted and sort of moved up a gear when Alison Abate joined the production, and she sort of like took a look at where things were at and decided, okay, well, the original idea was we're going to shoot on 35 millimeter. And all the cameras were there in London already and waiting to go, but the script needed some work, and and still things weren't quite ready. And so so she said, because Jack, you got I think 6 weeks to investigate moving over to digital photography and recording that. And it's, I think that Corpse Bride is the first feature stop motion that was recorded digitally. But what that did was it allowed for, sort of the digital photography allowed for a lot more rigs to be used, a lot of the compositing and rig removal became a lot easier. And I think what that did was really opened up the landscape for the animation and for the shoot, so that when you see Victor running through the woods and his feet are skating away on the ice, if that had been on Night Mode Before Christmas, you would have had to put it on wires.
Like fishing line. And we were able to attach rigs to the puppets. And also the cameras were a lot smaller, so you can get them into tighter spaces. And it just makes it a lot easier to maneuver around. So it was the first digital feature I'd ever worked on, and I haven't shot film since.
Carlos, I'm curious, cadavers are not usually what we think of as, warm and fuzzy characters we want to take home with us. And I'm curious, were there artists that you looked to, besides Tim himself, for ideas about making them sympathetic or just approachable? Like, we're looking at Posada from Mexico, for example, or are there other artists who influenced your approach?
I watched the Silly Symphony from Disney and then the sketches from Posada and the Dia de los Muertos, you know? Mm-hmm. And I really was struck by those. And it was a matter of pushing the rib cage, the pelvis. We had 10, 12 different pelvis and rib cages, and just making a caricature of that guy, thinking how he was when he was alive, and making the caricature of the skeleton, you know, and thinking that there were going to be rigid bones, that there will be no flesh, so no bending.
No, and that's also a problem they wrestled with on Coco.
Yeah.
That if you start to move a skull too much, it starts to look rubbery, and it doesn't look like a skull anymore. I assume that also factored in when the animation that you were doing, that it had to stay rigid.
Yeah, had to look like bone. Yeah, so.
Yeah, things like bone jangles, we ended up putting, like, you know, he has a little rotating jaw, but it's a very simple puppet. I know the movement to his face, you know, there's very little going on there. So, you know, most of it has to come through the body movement and the voice. But I think it's also, I know, you know, sort of, you know, the idea that, I know, the cadavers can be fuzzy, or, I know, sort of like, you know, it comes down, I think, you know, that Tim's love of, I know, sort of, you know, the influence of, you know, sort of like the Mexican influence on you know, the Day of the Dead is that, you know, it's about celebration, it's about life, and, you know, what better way, and they sort of, you know, to, you know, the land of the dead, that's where the party is. They're the most colourful characters, and I think, you know, that's the most celebratory part of the world. So I think it was trying to make sure the puppets and the design and the actual animation sort of married in with that.
Anthony, there was one set of bones that you had a particular link to, wasn't there? Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so Victor had a dog, Scraps, that had passed away. And when he is in the land of the dead, he's reunited with his dog. So while we were making the film, we needed some temp voice, you know, barks and things like that. And I had a little Pomeranian at the time named Bianca that I had brought over from the States, and she was with me in London. So we chased her around with a tape recorder and tried to get some barks and used it for the temp bark. But when it came time, you know, the film was wrapping up, when it came time to figure out what the real high quality bark would be, they decided, well, let's just record Bianca. We like her bark now, so take her down to the studio. We took her down into London, another studio, to record her barks, but she wouldn't bark. For the for the sound engineer, I got maybe 2 barks out of her, and I said, she has a really good bark. Let me take her home. Let me try training her to bark on command, and give me another chance, basically. So he said, yeah, okay, and I took her home, trained her how to bark on command by saying, "Who's there?" And she picked up on it. I gave her treats, and so every time I would say that, she would bark. So it took her back and recorded plenty of barks, and it's her bark that we hear in the movie.
Did she get her SAG card?
She was never credited.
Did she got paid?
But now she's getting lots of credit. There was a whole article written about her recently, and I actually have a short film I'm going to show right now, sort of the process of taking her down for the recording and a couple of scenes from the film.
That's good.
So Steve, you can play that dog video now.
Yeah, it's Bianca's big day. Right, okay, well I've got some stuff there, so, and it's good, so.
Scraps? Scraps! My dog Scraps! Oh, Scraps, what a good boy.
I knew you'd be happy to see him.
Who's my good boy? Sit. Sit, Scraps. Sit. Good boy, Scraps. Roll over. Roll over. Good boy, Scraps. Play dead.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to animate some of those shots too, just the single shots of her spinning around, rolling around and barking, and it was a lot of fun.
Well,
a beautiful puppet.
And when Emily says that how cute Scraps is, Victor's reply is, you should have seen him with fur. And so now we have.
In the original script, I know sort of Scraps is called Boots, and Boots the dog. I know Tim's early sketches of Boots was dog with fur on,
and with a knife.
And the original sketch has a cute dog with knife in back.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't do that. I changed it to the skeleton dog.
Okay, our time is about up, so please join me in thanking our guests for coming and sharing their experiences on the film. And thank you, gentlemen and Emily, and please enjoy the rest of Lightbox.
Have we got time for questions?
Yeah,
Have we got
sure.
time for questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, if
We have
anyone's
a-
got any questions.
Okay, we can take a question or two.
Yeah.
I don't know how articulate Emily will be, but you're welcome to talk to the others.
Hi, my name is Gabe. I'm interested in costume fabrication, and I was just wondering, is it at all possible for us to come up and take pictures of Emily?
Yeah, I know. Well, I know. So after we finish the questions, then I'll bring her down, and then.
Awesome! Thank you so much.
She's made of a Chinese silk.
Okay, I was wondering about materials and like what went in, because I know most of it was silicone, and it's very different from the stop motion movies that are made now, especially with like Leica or Shadow Machine. So I was wondering about materials that went into the costume.
We sculpted every costume because Tim and Carlos wanted a very sculptural shape. So the dress started off as a plasticine dress. Noel Baker sculpted it with all of the motion to it, and then we molded it. And then I know a costume maker, Talia Lane, I know who's at Leica now, then worked on layers of silicone and silk, and then creating all of the lovely sort of vine detail in there, and But the main thing, not only the animation, but Tim was really adamant that you could see the light through the costume. So I think that was a big sort of factor in how the costume was developed.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Next question, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, and how are you, Master? The one from Festival Fest. Hola,
Hola.
Carlos.
¿Qué tal?
Lo vi en Querétaro en un masterclass en línea. Well, here's one question. Well, for starters, happy milestone anniversary for
Thank
this
you
beautiful
so much.
film. Well, here's an interesting yet sad question. When was the last time you saw Master Joe Ranft?
Myself?
No, everybody. When was the last time you saw
I
Master
never met him.
Joe
actually.
Ranft?
Joe came round. I came to a visit to
He came to the studio
Yeah.
at 3 Mills. That was the last time I saw Joe. Yeah.
I had to do an obituary for him for National Public Radio, and people told me afterwards my voice was cracking during that piece because he was not only extraordinarily talented, he was just such a warm, kind man.
Yeah.
That the point where one storyboard artist at Pixar, who was fairly short, said, well, whenever Joe would talk to me, he would squat down so that he didn't loom over me, so I wasn't intimidated and could talk to him. And that kind of sensitivity was part of his personality and part of what he brought to the films he worked on. So, interesting question. Next lady, please.
Thank you.
Hi. So Carlos mentioned that the character designs were inspired by posadas in Mexico, and I just wanted to say that I think that's really nice because in the end, the movie that you guys made ended up inspiring Mexico and made it so that Mexico had its own animation industry. because without the Corpse Bride, we didn't really have an animation industry, and that inspired a lot of people. We have like the series, the Saga de las Leyendas, and then we have, we just made our very first ever stop motion film. I think it's called like Frankelda.
Thank you so much. I noticed that.
So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Carmela. Working on a Tim Burton film is like my end goal, my dream. So although I'm not an animator, I am a cinematographer, and I'm also very into early story development and character development. So I wanted to know, what is a non-negotiable quality or element, whether it be a personal, something on a resume, that building a world like this, somebody like a director like Tim would be looking for specifically, or a team like yours that's different from, you know, Disney or anywhere else? What is a quality or a skill that would set somebody apart that you would be looking for to work with someone like that?
I don't know. I think he saw something that he says.
Yeah, I think he would. I know he'd probably be looking at the visuals of the work rather than necessarily a resume with the details of what you've done. I know sort of. I think that's. I think anything that you can do that has visual impact that sells your work very quickly to someone. But I think I know sort of when Tim's working with people, it's a connection. Just being able to chat and talk and be able to. I don't know, sort of like, the communication that becomes, I think he likes to surround himself by fellow artists, and so I don't know, sort of, I think if he feels that he can trust you and that you're going to follow his direction, and he has this amazing. I've talked about this, this visual shorthand of, I don't know, if he can't tell you what he wants, he'll draw it. Mm-hmm. I think it's he's worked with some amazing cinematographers over the years, so I know, but aim high.
All right, thank you so much.
Next question.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. It is an honor to be around such amazing filmmakers and to be in the presence of Emily. That's amazing. My question is, in multiple shots throughout the film, there were shots where Emily was almost glowing. She had like a luminous essence about her. How was this achieved? Was this through CGI? Was it through a singular spotlight? How was she glowing?
I think they use a lot of diffusion, the camera department.
Yeah, a lot of diffusion and sort of, I think also the fact that the Pete Kozjek and the lighting team, they could blast light through the dress, so that gave this sort of luminous quality to it. And I don't know, sort of, it's the lighting and soft diffusion. There's no, I don't think there was really, that much manipulation in post. I know sort of there probably was in odd shots, but I think it's more down to clever lighting.
That's amazing.
Okay. We'll take one more question, then they're going to have to clear the room for the next panel, I believe.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
I cited Corpse Bride as one of the films that inspired some of my stories I'm writing, and artwork as well. I even wrote about this film in my critique for the history of animation class I took at college. And when it came to the art of Burton and Grangel, I found myself admiring Grangel's artwork, and I found myself wondering, is there a possibility that the volumes of the Grangel Studios books are going to be published in a way that has me look into the development of Corpse Bride further than the invitation to the wedding book?
Well, actually, Charles has been working in our book since 25 years now. Are we going to have it done?
Who knows, we may someday. I have to say, Carlos is a good friend of mine, and I've been to his studio in Barcelona, and the artwork that's been published is just a fraction of it. Some of it's absolutely amazing. And as you've seen from some of these drawings, a lot of it is done on the backs of cereal boxes because he likes the texture and the color of the pasteboard. So I think his whole studio lives on cold cereal, so he has material to work on. But the drawings themselves are dazzling.
I think I will wait until I die, and then they can do the book, and it will sell better.
Yeah.
It'll be hard
very sweet from you.
It'll be hard to get signed copies, though.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of LightBox.